Good day, everyone. Good evening in Asia. Good afternoon in Europe. Good morning in the US. My name is Persson. I'm part of the product management, product marketing team. Together, I have Christian Sperlich with me from the product management team, and also product owner of the new module that we will look into today. Very happy to have you all on board. This will be a great hour. Let's move forward a bit, Christian, in the slide deck. Whatever you will see today here, we will send you, and you will get the PowerPoint and the recording. And obviously, we would like you to share that with your team members wherever you are. We also you have probably been involved in other similar online events that we have had. So we obviously appreciate feedback on how we can improve and so on and so forth. So that's typically a question that you get at the end. Let's get into this session and this series. So as you will soon see, and maybe I recognize some names that are online right now. Some of you have been introduced to Integrator Workspace as well. But this series is important for all of you, with regards to understanding how we have evolved the Business Integration Suite platform over 2025 and into 2026. This series is a start of 5 to 6 webcasts. The second one, and I will remind you again at the end of today, the second one is already up. And we want to show you what we have done, what we have released with regards to how you can work with integrations today. Given existing challenges, opportunities, AI trends, API-based integration, software as a service, so on and so forth. So this is one of 5 to 6 webcasts that we will run during 2026. Next slide, please. So this is the agenda. It will be, we're in the hour. So a little bit on the overall evolution, and this is where Christian will start. And then we'll just dig into the integrated workspace. We will do demonstrations because it's important. We believe it's important to show and explain from showing the technology as well. So having said that, Christian, it's all you, and let's take it away from there.
Yeah, thanks, Ulf. So also welcome from my side, and let's start directly with the topics. So first of all, I would say a few words about the Evolved Business Integration Suite. That is also something we started to talk about in the last quarterly update session. And of course, what we have done is we have added new services to our integration suite. And the main idea behind that, especially now with the service we are demonstrating today, the Integrator Workspace, is the topic all about this design centrally. So here we have created new tools for designing integrations, for now mainly for the API integration scenarios and also AI topics. And an important part here is the ability to share content. So with that, we are able to offer you a lot of connectors, then templates, stuff like that, in a catalog which you can directly access and use for your implementations. And what is then created here in this design centrally area can of course be executed anywhere, and that is the important thing here. So for that, it doesn't matter if it's an iPaaS service from us, if it's an on-premise BIS, if you have it in an AWS or an Azure tenant, it doesn't matter. So important, design centrally in our cloud environment and then deploy it and run it wherever it's required. And for that, we also worked a bit on the naming. So as I said, we have added stuff to our integration suite So in general, we call here the BIS server everything which you run. So for instance, if you have today your BIS 6.7 and you operate that in your own data center or in your Azure environment, then this would be named BIS server. And of course, the same technology, if we run it for you within our cloud, then we call it BIS Hub. And therefore, of course, all iPaaS, full managed service things, and also the services we have around e-invoicing and so on are all in this namespace of BIS Hub. And of course, also the new services we are talking about today, like Integrator Workspace, Integration Asset Catalog, and in combination with that, especially with the Integrator Workspace, the Flow Designer and the web-based mapper. And what we also offer are the so-called BIS Accelerator services or application management services, which are also, of course, using AI topics in the background. But here it's about handing over additional tasks, maybe from your on-prem world to our operational teams. So in general, it's definitely an extension to our offering so far with this combination. And here, of course, the BIS server is preserving the core. So that is where you can execute your integrations locally. And here, BIS Hub adds additional things. So in general, of course, it's the cloud-based entry point to extend your on-premise BIS, and here to design and govern and share integration assets with the Integrator Workspace, where we can also then, of course, have these kind of hybrid executions, but also everything around our packaged integration services and everything counts into this BIS Hub topic. And as mentioned before, our BIS Accelerator services. So with these to ensure here the outcomes on your side. So also to reduce operational risks and things like that on your side. But let's then concentrate today on the Integrator Workspace. So what is it in general? It's a unified design and governance layer. So that means here it's a design time which exists within our cloud environment, where you can model, configure, test, and document your integrations. And then from there, deploy it either to our BIS Hub-based runtimes or BIS server, so the on-premise runtimes. In the background, of course, all the assets we are versioning automatically. And an important topic, of course, is here that we are enhancing especially the design time with AI assistance to make it even easier to build up these integrations. And for deployment, as said, you can deploy it wherever, and we are also delivering it in general as a managed service option, hybrid option, iPaaS, and mainly right now for this SaaS to SaaS or API based integrations. But we will come to that later on more in detail. First of all, I would like to show you then how it looks like. For that, I'm logging in via the customer portal. If it's booked for an organization, you will then have access to the service via that. And if you log in, you directly start within a consumption dashboard where you can see how many flows were processed in a certain time frame, how much data in general was processed via these flows. And for that, we are counting all input and output messages for every API call within the flow. So in general, here everything is ordered in so-called projects. A project contains everything it requires for executing the flows. That means the flows itself, then we can have subflows, accounts, which are the more or less the credentials for certain SaaS endpoints. So for instance, here, this Salesforce account is configured to use OAuth client credential flow with the credentials. And with that, of course, I can use it in multiple flows just by referencing to that. And for this project for today, I've just prepared some accounts here. Then you have also so-called trust stores, which we require for our SFTP client connector, and an overview about the mappings which are used within the flows typically. Then if you have your project and you have created flows and you have tested the flow, I will show later on in a second demo how a flow is built up. Then you can deploy the project, and here with this deployments, you have an overview about all flows which are deployed in this tenant. Also, if they are deployed to different runtimes, doesn't matter, you have a central overview about all deployments from here. Combined with that, of course, we have a runtime overview. That means in general, you always have access to our shared BIS hub-based runtime, but you can also, via a simple step-by-step option here, to connect your own BIS 6.7 server as a runtime. For that, you require a certain BIS version at least, and of course also an additional article for the additional modules to execute these kind of flows. And then we have the monitoring overview here. You can see all flows which were executed in a certain time frame. You can filter the time frame, and you can also see additional details. I will show that later on together with the flow creation. And one very important part here is this assets. So that is the entry point for our asset catalog. And here you see for now the assets we are already sharing that are so-called connectors and templates, and mappings will follow in a few weeks. In general here, these connectors are the API descriptions for certain API endpoints or SaaS services, and they are ready to use. And of course, if you would like to create new ones, you can upload connectors by just uploading an open API definition of an endpoint, and then you can directly use it within your flow design. Here you see for now we have 78 listed here, but as you can see here, some are grouped based on the company or the purpose, and in total we are around about 300 individual connectors. So for instance, if I go into the Microsoft group, you see here then connectors for Microsoft Dynamics, Dynamics 365 Business Central, Dynamics Sales, Teams, and so on. So a lot of individual endpoints which are directly supported on that level. And as mentioned, you can directly use that, but we will see that later on as well. And then also showing that here we have here access to SIA. SIA is our SEEBURGER integration assistant. So that is the AI assistance we are offering. So for instance, I can ask here how to create a flow. And of course, that is what typically happens in a live demo. I can give her a second try. Of course, in the break between the sessions, she responded, but here that is chatting more or less with our online help. I will figure out later on what exactly went wrong, but here you also have direct access to all that information, and we will use SIA later on also during the design, where it, in my opinion, helps even more than asking these general questions. What we also have included here is guided tours. So for instance, here I'm getting started with Integrator Workspace. So you can have a guided tour where we highlight where you need to click and explain a bit how it works for a general introduction and how to create your first flow. And we are also sending here announcements for bigger features which we are releasing. And of course, also in addition to that, we have our normal release notes, which are also linked within the online documentation. And here you can also give direct feedback. So if you have any new ideas, something is missing when you try it out, when you work with it, or you figure out some kind of issue, you can directly report it to us and we will then take care of it. So that for the first overview, and of course also wrapping it up a bit and showing additional topics or capabilities as well, is first of all, again, to mention here the integration asset catalog, which I've shown you also in the product live. And here that is one of the key topics in my opinion, because here you have access to connectors and also templates. A template is a flow which is anonymized, so you can directly download it from the catalog and reuse this flow. You can extend it for your requirements, but you do not need to start the whole implementation from scratch. And that is, of course, something where we are working heavily on to bring in more and more of these templates into the catalog to make it easier than for future projects to do the implementations. And yeah, of course, also here you have the possibility, if you work in a bigger team, that you can upload your flows to the catalog to share it for now only with your colleagues in the same organization, but then they can reuse your subflows or your flows within their own project. So also a nice feature here for collaborative work. Then data transformation and mapping, of course, also during integration flows, you know that you always need to transform the data from the source to the destination format. And for that, we are also using here our BIS mapping language. So the same we are using in our BIS Developer Studio, BIS Mapping Designer, but with a different UI on top of it here with a web-based UI, with a different focus, also aiming for people who are not writing mappings every day. So in general, it's always a schema-aware mapping. You see here that we are basing the whole thing on showing you the schema in a tree structure, and you can work with drag and drop. And of course, we have our typical broad format support and integrated testing, but we will see that later on in the second demo as well. And then the flow modeling and orchestration. So visual flow designer, where you are just designing your flows, and you can do a lot of validation and logic directly in the flow. For instance, here with this for each loop, you do not need to split a file up front, because here we keep the JSON messages, which you're typically dealing with the APIs, in memory, and you can directly work on it, access it, extract data out of it, so individual values, or loop over it if it, for instance, has an array with multiple occurrences. You can also create reusable subflows, and here we are supporting with AI-guided design. I will show that later on as well, how or what is possible in regards to the support of SIA here. And also very important and very powerful in the design time is the integrated testing. So you can directly test every single step when you configure it to see that it works, and then you go on to the next steps. Then after you have designed your flow, you have here, again, this centralized configuration for all the connectors, the authentication, what I've showed you for the project, and then you can deploy this project to a runtime. And for that, we are then creating a deployment package and shipping that to the according runtime, so to the BIS Hub-based runtime or to a BIS server deployment. And here, important to mention, we have here a strict separation then between design time and runtime, which means also if you then start to change your integration, afterwards, after you have deployed it, of course, that will not affect anything on your runtime until you decide to deploy now a new version to the runtime. As long as you have not deployed the new version, of course, the old one is still running, and you can play around and test and change your flow on the design time without any risk. And that is, of course, this deployment validation, so that you are, again, testing your flows and ensuring that the results are fitting what you require on that. And then, as mentioned before, we have SEER here, so possibility to ask questions about the connectors. You can get explanations for the individual steps. So with that, definitely it's support then for all skill levels. And we have tried that out last year. And also beginning of this year, we had an internal workshop where our salespeople have done certain integrations on their own in some kind of a training, just to also see if they can succeed here on that level. And of course, what you see is typically that people are using SEER more often if they are not doing integrations on a daily basis. But that's totally fine, and that is exactly what we want to achieve, that we enable other user groups with that as well to be able to do these kind of integrations. And of course, also with that, we have a quicker onboarding on that with this intuitive assistance. And in addition, we all, do not only have our AI support during the creation of flows, you can also create flows which utilize LLMs in between. So for instance, you can use LLMs for validating input messages, extract data out of mail bodies, what you receive. You can do reasoning on messages and so on. And also you can build up agents where you do not have this strict step-by-step configuration. You just enable an agent to do additional tasks by adding tools. You can do that by, on the one hand side, building up additional subflows and using them as tools for an AI agent. And you can also connect external MCP servers as tools for the agent. And of course, if these kind of flows are then executed, you also have the governance and transparency in the monitoring. You see, for instance, how many tokens were used by the agent calls. You see which tools he has called for finding the answer or producing the output, which was then handed over back to the flow, which you can then also use for handing back to a chat interface or just going on in your normal processing. And also here we have an embedded documentation option. So if you have created a flow, you can create automatically based on an LLM here, then also the documentation for the flow. And if you would like to, you can also edit this automatically generated documentation by adding additional parts to it. So it's just created then in Markdown, and you can also, of course, use it to export it and put it into your wiki systems or wherever you would like to have your documentation. So, and
Christian, Ulf, so before we dig into and show what we now have described, there was actually one question that popped up here, more related. I think you mentioned it a few times, you know, onboarding, but you know, given clients and our experience now, you know, having this rolled out for some time, what is the, you know, do you have a feeling for, and you're involved in many of these as well from your perspective, being the product owner. So from an ROI perspective, there was a question related, where do we typically see the fastest ROI, you know, in comparison the way maybe customers have been working with integration before. Anything around that you just quickly can elaborate on before we dig into the demo?
Yeah, so of course that always depends on the customer, how his setup is, but in general I would say it's mainly in being faster with the implementation, and of course also if you have the possibility to enable other user groups to do things on their own, that definitely also helps in regards to that, because then you can use the guys from the IT team who are the real integration specialists for more complex tasks, and spread the work over multiple people. And
so kind of you're addressing the fact that, you know, going back 5 years, this was a typical technical task, but again, with the evolution of AI and there are more business folks involved, so it will give them a way to maybe share assets, what have you, and then deploy projects which may look a little bit different in the future, which also guarantee faster success and, you know, business success. Yeah.
And a lot of this overhead you have with handing over tasks from A to B to C and so on, if that can be done by one person directly, which is much faster and cheaper, of course.
Okay, cool. So, well, let's see some more details. Go ahead, please.
Yep. And for that, I now would like to show you a quite simple flow. We used that also for our roadshows, for our internal trainings, but it shows the overall concept quite good. So the idea is I would like to fetch data from a Shopify demo instance and send it over to Salesforce instance for a contact update on that level. So first of all, I will create a flow. I will call it demo flow. And you can, of course, also key in a short description that also colleagues know what the flow should do. So here we are starting then with the flow assistant, which is a simple wizard. First of all, you can choose the trigger, because a flow always needs a trigger which starts it. And here you can choose from a scheduler trigger, so based on certain time intervals for polling, typically. Then we have the HTTP trigger. So here you get then an URL, and from external webhook, for instance, can trigger this integration flow. And chat trigger means here we also then have a small chat application, and this chat will trigger a flow. And of course, with that you can interact with the flow, and typically it's something for agents, where you then can also ask back to the user certain things if informations are missing, which the agent requires to fulfill his task. But that is something we will see in a future episode of this webcast series. Today we will just use, for simplicity, a schedule trigger. And then if I click on next, I have the option here to select the source connector. And as I said, we want to fetch data from Shopify. So I'm clicking here. This connector has only one operation, and that is execute a GraphQL query. So that means GraphQL is a querying language. With that, I can access data, and I can also update data behind that. But of course, you need to know how that works, and I will show you how you can get also assistance on that level. Then I can also select a target, or at any time I can say save and close and add the target connector then later on. So first of all, let's configure this Shopify task. Here in the base URL, of course, I need to adapt the base URL. Here we have this store name placeholder in it, and that I will replace with the shop name of my demo shop for that. And I'm choosing here the account, which I pre-configured, which mainly just contains my API key for the access to this Shopify instance. But then now I said, okay, we want to get customer data, and we need to build up for that a GraphQL query. So either I know how to do that and I can create that manually, or I use here SIA, the configuration assistant, and just describe what I would like to have. So I would like to get customer data, just the first one, and included the fields, let's say name, family name, phone, and email. So then here it comes back. Okay, that means here I will update the GraphQL query to fetch the first customer with first name, last name, and you can see here also it has automatically matched that I would like to have family name, but the real field name for that is last name, also the phone and email fields. So I'm applying that. Now you can see we have built up for that now the request body. And of course, let's directly test this. And as you can see, it's exactly what I expected. I've received back one customer entry here with the first name, last name, phone, and email. And below you get via this interface always here the info about the throttling status, because they are limiting their API to a certain usage amount per time frame. So, and now I will copy that to the clipboard, because I want to use that, of course, as an input for our mapping, because now we want to map this data from this Shopify structure to the according Salesforce structure. And for that, I say I would like to add a flow step. Here in this tab, we have access to all the connectors from our catalog. Then we have additional controls like for each, while, if else conditions. We can add additional JavaScript capabilities to also work on the payload if required, and also our AI functions. And then I have here a tab for mappings, and if I would have some also to drag and drop in subflows. But now we want to have a mapping, so I'm dragging in the mapping action here. And for the source schema, I just say I would like to derive it from sample data, because especially with this GraphQL, depending on your query, the data can look different, and therefore I'm just using now exactly this, what I've selected based on it, and name this Shopify derive schema. And for the target schema, I'm going a different path. Here I'm querying the connector. So we said we have our Salesforce connector, and I said I would like to create a contact based on that in Salesforce. So I'm choosing here the contact schema and say add schema. Now it's extracting it from the connector. It has given it automatically a name, and also used my uploaded sample data, which I used to create the schema. And then it's complete. I say create mapping. So now it's physically creating the schemas, and then also starting the web mapper UI for me. And here you see I'm doing a JSON to JSON mapping. And here I have the data, and then I can just drag and drop as simple as possible for this mapping here. So let's drag and drop phone. And for email, I can also drag and drop. I can also do here with a visual editor, for instance, I can say plus and choose additional data on that level. To concat it, I can set fixed values. I can use all the functions BIS mapper typically has. And of course, here, because it's based on the schema definition from an example file, so the cardinality is not clear, and that is why it shows me the warnings, but that's okay with the cardinality, and therefore I can just ignore that for now. The important thing is here we are always combining the structure also here with the example data, and on the target side as well, we show the target tree and the fields where we map things to also directly with the results. So you have always a live feedback of what's happening here, and you can, if required, also go to the raw data view if you would like to see it in the pure JSON. But yeah, in general, of course, here that is really helpful on that level to see how everything looks like on that. And here, for completeness, we are also showing the code which is generated, but of course you do not need to write it manually for the typical functions here. But of course you can also do if you would like to, and then you just click apply mapping code, and then it will be reflected in this graph here as well. So, but we have now seen that it's mapped and the result looks good. So I'm just save and close. And then I'm back here. And of course, we can, again, test here. So we have the test data already in. Then I can also test this step. You see it's success. It comes as expected back. And now we come to the Salesforce. And for that, here we will create a so-called S object, so a Salesforce object. For that, I need to choose here what kind of object I will send to Salesforce, and I'm choosing here my prepared account. The only thing I'm copying over from my notepad is here the URL, because again, here is the instance key which needs to be replaced, but it's not as simple as the other one from Shopify. Therefore, I prefer to copy it in to avoid here typos on it. So, and then I can directly also do here the step test. So let's see what happens. Okay, status is error, bad request. So we get back from Salesforce missing content type HTTP header. Invalid content type. So either I directly know what it means, or I can again go to SEER and say here analyze the step test error. So now here, based on this test error, 400 bad request status code indicates error code, invalid content type, the message. It explains me the root cause. So the Salesforce API requires a content type header to be explicitly set. And of course, also the solution, you need to add a content type header with the value application JSON to match the JSON request. Would you like me to add the required content type header to fix this error? So a simple yes. And here, now it prepared for me the configuration change for this action, which is setting a content type header or a header content type application JSON. So I just click apply and test it again. And as you can see now, it went through successfully. A typical thing on APIs is that you get the real status back also within the body of the response. And then I can also do a full flow test. And here you see now, again, every single step where you can see the request and the response message for every step. And as well here, the request, so the message we have sent in and the response we got back. And in general, that's it. So we have now created an integration flow for replicating data from Shopify to Salesforce just in a few minutes without leaving the context, and of course also without knowing what GraphQL is and what a content type header is and how to set it. So for that, I just used the assistance. And that is what I meant. That is really helpful on that level if some strange messages comes back. And of course, now I can also directly say, as mentioned before, I would like to have a documentation for what I've created. And you can see here, it's then giving an overview of what the flow in general is doing, which connectors are used, which mapping is used, the overall flow structure with the flow components, and the individual configuration for each of the steps. Here with the configuration and the description, what it is good for, what it's doing. And as mentioned before, you can also, with Markdown, directly edit it and then export it here as PDF or Markdown. And of course, also it will be automatically then saved together with the flow and can be accessed later on as well. And here in the monitoring, I've now also here I have the demo flow, and with a few details, I get the same overview again, what I had before on that level. So that was a short Integrator Workspace in action. And from here on, I would then hand over to you, Ulf.
Cool. Just a question here. Thank you, Christian. So, I mean, you talked about it that now you kind of implemented because we wanted to showcase SIA, correct? So,
yeah.
But what's the gut feel, you know, also maybe in comparison with the way things we have, how you've done things previously, you know, this visual way of doing integration, mapping, what have you, versus actually start to get down to code level and maybe JavaScript and so on and so forth. What's your feeling there? And you know, given the projects we have done, how does people work, or how do you work?
In general, with this possibility here of this visual design of the flows and that everything is combined, you are really working more concentrated on that topic, and you're much faster with that because you do not switch between any kind of applications. Of course, the mapping itself, I personally prefer to have as much as possible drag and drop possibilities on that. But colleagues who are only writing mappings, they are doing the code thingy, typically. But the important thing is this mix, that both sides can work together. So I can easily do my mapping, and of course, if I fail on that level, I can just ask one of the mapping gurus to connect to it, do his magic on the code base, and leave again. Without sending stuff from left to right and so on. So also this direct access and that people can work together in the same project is really, really helpful.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a good introduction. Let's continue the slide. I mean, if we move forward, you know, the next one as well here. Just what you mentioned, and for all of you, we start to see, you know, the way that enterprises are working. You have business analysts that are more engaged. Maybe there are specific projects that they can start to work with, tools such as Integrator Workspace, start to do high-level mapping, maybe working with assets that have been put together by the technologists, more the technical users. And this is obviously also part of our vision. We see this in a more, you know, more of a control plane type, you know, you work centralized, you work with the integration from a central point of view, and then you deploy where the data is. And these are, you know, a few business benefits that we see. If you look at the next slide as well, I think you obviously went through an example of software SaaS to SaaS integrations, and I hope you all understand and can see how fast this can be done. Of course, now we have prepared a few things, but this is also a typical example on where with the improvements we have added to the product and Integrator Workspace, given trends, and you know that many also traditional applications are becoming more and more can be reached through APIs in various ways. So that's one good use cases. For those of you that are on that already have an existing on-premise BIS, for example, obviously Integrated Workspace would provide a very good environment for you to start to structure integrations, deploy them on-prem if needed. You can also deploy them in the cloud, and there's a different way of dividing and sharing integrations within the enterprise. And that could also introduce capabilities to other type of users within your enterprise that can start to look into, for example, SaaS to SaaS integrations. Next slide, please. And this is exactly, here is a very good example. It's one of an existing customer, a global manufacturer, actually quite big, large enterprise that has operations all over the world, and they had an you know, again, given applications that they're using, in this case Coupa, you know, they were trying to figure out a more efficient way to improve master data management, invoice and order management. So they started to work with BIS Hub that we are managing and operating for them. Again, as Christian mentioned in the beginning, this is where we will have all our cloud-based integration services and the design world, so to say. You've seen the Integrated Workspace, and in parallel with that, because they have a, you know, an existing environment where they have over the years built up in an infrastructure using BIS server, various type of integration. They're using SAP as their core application, and this is now working very well. More from a separation perspective, the business value is there. You can work with integration from a central perspective and then deploy when and as needed, in this case on-prem. Next slide, please. So let's wrap this up. And this is kind of also, again, we wanted to, given what we have done during the last year, we feel that we have start to get a stronger way of working and more flexible way of working with integration. Also make sure of that, obviously, that our existing clients still can gain from this when you are ready. We are and we will continue to think in this central way of managing integrations, add on even more user-friendly capabilities. We are, as you probably understand, you know, populating our connector integration asset catalog on a weekly basis with different type of API-led connectivity. AI is very important for us as well, not only from a product, you know, increased productivity, and Christian demonstrated that with using SIA, our assistant, but also to start to look at, you know, including agents and agentic kind of intelligence within Flow. And this is what, and I will come to that soon, that this is what the next webcast in this series will address. Everyone may not be ready yet, and of course, depending on your environment, but I think it's important to share ideas with you as well to see what you can do once you get to that stage. You know, deploy anywhere. As mentioned, it's important to have an environment where you when you have done your integration, you know, deploy it where the data is running, so to say. And again, we as we always do, we make sure of that, you know, we give a solid path to existing clients so they can start to add on, you know, whatever we do from a feature and function perspective in their pace. So I think we are kind of at the end, Christian. I see there's another questions coming up here. Maybe it was also triggered by the demo, you know, and also to maybe recap on what I said, but more from a functional point of view. When do you introduce? You can introduce Integrator Workspace whenever, or how do you need to think here, so to say? Especially, I mean, if you're an existing client, there's maybe, if you're new, it's a little bit different approach, but existing, anything you want to share about that more from a functional perspective, technology-wise?
In general, you can always start trying Integrator Workspace out or implementing new topics you have, which definitely fit into this area. So additional API integrations or stuff like that there, and you can easily combine it with your existing landscape. So as we said before, you can then decide if you would like to deploy it to the on-prem system, or if you say, okay, these Integrator Workspace flows, I would like to execute them in the BIS Hub shared runtime. But of course, the result, like with the example with the Coupa, where we are sending the result to the existing BIS server on-premise, which is then just routing it through to the backend system. So,
okay. And then there's another one. If you're running, I mean, we know that especially large enterprises has many type of integration type technologies depending on, you know, industries and what have you. So where does IWS fit in here? You have anything there, you know, that you can see and the business value, maybe to run it in parallel with something else?
Yeah, of course. For instance, if you run it in parallel with our B2B solution, or if you have any other vendor you're using for certain topics, and you see benefits using Integrator Workspace, especially here for this SaaS connectivity, or also for the agentic AI topic, you can easily integrate it, especially via this HTTP trigger interface, and also you can send back to whatever platform you would like to send data to via a normal HTTP call.
Yeah. Okay. We're almost on time. So unless you have something else, Christian, let's move on to the next slide. So next session, by the way, thank you everyone for participating. I hope this was useful for you. Hope it gave you an idea of where we are going with the business integration suite. Next session, more focus on agentic AI. It's in April, and we will obviously, based on what we did today, you know, more focus on agentic AI, and obviously showcase you in a similar way, doing demonstration and point out a few things. So please sign on for this. You can find it on our event page. As mentioned, please, next slide, please, Christian. For those of you also, you know, we have a community where we encourage, this is more for the existing clients, where we encourage you to share ideas, work with your peers and what have you. And if you're not on the SEEBURGER community, here's a way to sign on to that and get involved maybe in a different way than previously. Next one, please. Again, we always like feedback. Please provide feedback to this session. If there's something else you want to see, other ideas, and of course we will then do whatever we can to you know, put together other sessions. Yeah, I think. Thank you, Christian. We're good. We're done for today. Have a great rest of the day, evening, morning, all of you. And until next time, take care. All the best.